In the past few days, several political commentators have been talking about the need for Europe to de-risk from America. In other words, to reduce its reliance on the US, given President Trump's persistent unstable and erratic behaviour towards NATO and Europe. A similar debate seems to be taking shape in the UK too, with newspapers from The Telegraph to The New Statesman suggesting this week that the so-called special relationship might be in decline, despite Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves insisting otherwise. So, in this video, we'll explain the US-UK special relationship, why it's becoming an issue for the UK, and whether the UK, like Europe, also needs to de-risk from America. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. First, we'll start with the US-UK relationship. The two countries have been close allies since the start of the 20th century, having fought together in the First and Second World Wars. Since then, they've continued a close military partnership both within and outside NATO, leading the Five Eyes alliance, that also includes Canada, Australia and New Zealand, and cooperating on nuclear weapons under the 1958 US-UK Mutual Defence Agreement. For more than 80 years, this partnership has been known as the Special Relationship, with the UK closely tied to the US on security, trade, foreign policy and military procurement. Over the decades, as the US has asserted itself as the global hegemon and the UK's geopolitical heft has waned, the relationship has become undeniably lopsided. This has occasionally made life difficult for the UK, which can sometimes feel like it's being pushed around by its larger neighbours. But despite moments of tension, the US and UK have remained very close allies, with successive UK governments arguing that the special relationship is essential to the UK's global influence and national security. However, the re-election of Trump as US president has thrown a spanner in the works. While Starmer initially drew praise for his handling of Trump, gaining a positive reputation on the international stage for helping maintain US military support for Ukraine, in recent weeks, several events have happened that suggest a downturn in US-UK relations. First, in December, the US suspended the so-called Tech Prosperity Deal, a multi-billion-dollar investment package by US tech firms in the UK, reportedly due to the stalling of negotiations on the US-UK trade deal. Second, last weekend, Trump threatened to impose an additional 10% tariff from the 1st of February on 8 European countries, including the UK, that opposed his annexation of Greenland, before then dropping this threat on Wednesday. Third, this week Trump also attacked the UK's Chagos Islands deal, calling it an act of great stupidity, despite the fact that, only last year, he was apparently in favour of it. Fourth, and finally, Trump took aim at the UK in his Davos speech, suggesting the UK was too focused on renewables and should instead be drilling more oil in the North Sea. At the same time, Starmer's response to Trump's recent attacks has been surprisingly robust. He called Trump's overtures towards Greenland completely wrong, declaring during Prime Minister's questions that he would not yield to Trump's pressures over the Chagos Islands, and then refused to attend the signing of Trump's so-called Board of Peace, which was unveiled at Davos on Thursday. At the same time, Starmer's government has apparently taken steps to mend ties with China, which probably won't go down too well in the White House. Only a couple of days ago, the government finally approved plans for a Chinese mega embassy at Royal Mint Court, which has been stalled for years. And Reuters reported on Wednesday that Starmer was planning to revive a suspended UK-China business dialogue during his visit to Beijing next week, which was originally set up during the so-called golden era of UK-China relations under first David Cameron and then Theresa May. Anyway, this rather public falling out, plus Starmer's sudden pivot to China, has led to some speculation that we might finally be witnessing the end of the special relationship, and that Starmer has finally given up on his strategy of appeasement with Trump. In this light, it looks like Starmer is essentially following in the footsteps of his European and Canadian counterparts, who are rapidly trying to de-risk from America. So, is this it? Is Starmer really consigning the special relationship to the dustbin of history? Well, maybe. This does feel like a turning point in Starmer's personal relationship with Trump, and it's notable that even much of the British right has become appalled by this US administration. Nonetheless, it's worth noting that if the UK does try to de-risk or decouple from America, it might have a tougher time than its European neighbours. The first issue is defence. As we mentioned earlier, the US-UK Mutual Defence Agreement means that the UK is heavily dependent on the US for its nuclear deterrent. While the UK designs, builds and maintains its own nuclear warheads and submarines, it relies on the US for the servicing and maintenance of the Trident D5 missiles, which the US effectively leases to the UK. This means that, while the UK's nuclear deterrent is operationally independent, meaning only the UK Prime Minister can authorise its use, it's still not fully sovereign. As such, since Trump returned to office and cast doubt over the future of NATO, there's been renewed focus on how the UK could reduce its reliance on the US for its nuclear deterrent. As such, the UK is now partnering with France, NATO's other nuclear power, with the two countries signing the joint Northwood Declaration in July, agreeing to significantly deepen their nuclear cooperation. This marked a notable shift. The UK had previously only ever mentioned coordination of its nuclear forces with the US, at least publicly, while France has never publicly suggested coordinating with any other country. Another defence concern is about possible US access to UK national security data. In December, the Ministry of Defence awarded a £240 million contract to Palantir, the US software and AI giant owned by billionaire Trump ally Peter Thiel, which sparked controversy due to Thiel's close links to the Trump administration, including sponsoring US Vice President J.D. Vance's political career. While the MOD said this week that all data analysed by Palantir's software remains under UK control, critics say that relying on a US defence contractor, and one that's so close to the Trump administration, could risk the UK's long-term sovereignty. The second reason is economic. The British and American economies are deeply interlinked. The two countries do more than £100 billion worth of trade each year, and the US remains the UK's largest single export market by some distance. The two countries' financial systems are also intertwined, with London acting as a centre of the offshore dollar market. If de-risking from the US is understood as requiring the UK to reduce its economic reliance on the US, this will require a pretty dramatic recalibration of the British economy. Now, you're probably looking to follow this story as it develops, but how are you supposed to keep track of which outlets online are actually trustworthy, and which are just fabricating a false narrative for you to follow? Well, that's where our sponsor this week, Ground News, comes in. That's because Ground News is a website and app that helps you make sense of the complex and ever-changing media landscape. It can get increasingly overwhelming, with thousands of articles being thrown at us every day. But Ground News puts all of those articles into one place, helping you fully understand the story from start to finish. Each article even comes with a breakdown into bias distribution, factuality, and ownership of each individual source. For instance, if we take this story on Starmer saying the UK will not yield to pressure over Greenland, we can see that there are 71 sources currently reporting on it, with most of the coverage coming from the centre. We can even dive into how each side is reporting using their bias comparison feature, showing us that the left is focusing on Starmer's comments while the right focuses on Trump's criticism of the UK. Our absolute favourite feature though is their blind spot feed. Here you can see all the stories you might not have seen on your feed. So even if you don't agree with the reporting, it's good to know what's being left out of your bubble. You're probably used to being fed the news that the algorithm has decided is best for you, and breaking out of that spiral is harder than ever. Ground News will do that for you, freeing you from algorithmic restraints and letting you think freely again. So, if you want to start questioning the narrative instead of just consuming it, you can join Ground News today, and using our link will get you 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description. Go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.